Welcome back to Cheddar News, everyone. Well, now to the ongoing supply chain crisis. A new warning from the head of a steel distributor in Ohio, the CEO of Majestic Steel, saying he believes three factors will have the biggest impact on the industrial supply chain over the next 6 months: steel mill production, availability of imports, and the return of the automotive sector. Well, he says all of these things could lead to even more supply chain havoc in early 2022. So joining me now to discuss is the CEO of Majestic Steel, Todd Leebow. Todd, thanks so much for coming on the show. Just paint the picture for me. What is the status of the supply chain right now when it comes to your industry?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I mean, right now we're at an inflection point in the market. Steel prices have been rising for 12 months, and now really production outages are here in the fourth quarter, with new capacity coming online next year. At the same time, the chip shortage in the auto sector has actually helped in terms of the lack of demand there. However, all other sectors have been tight in terms of the supply chain, and then imports are starting to come in terms of the difference between import prices and domestic prices. So we're definitely at an inflection point in the market, and what's going on in the steel supply chain and how it's impacting all end users of steel.
How has this impacted prices, the prices that you're paying and the prices that your customers are paying?
Yeah, we saw 12 months of continuous price increases for steel. We just got to a point in the market where it's plateaued. There's uncertainty in terms of where it will go from here, but costs are definitely elevated, and that was because of the supply chain disruption. There just wasn't enough steel to feed the demand coming out of the pandemic. And there's still a lot of uncertainty moving forward in terms of whether or not there will be enough supply and what's going to happen with demand, especially with the auto and energy markets.
Mm-hmm. So what is the impact on the automotive market that you're witnessing?
Yeah, I mean, the chip shortage obviously has impacted auto demand. The expectation is for that to resolve itself at some point in 2022. Once we see that happen, we're going to see a rebuild of inventory on the auto side, which then is going to pull steel from the supply chain that could have an impact on other markets that have already been short of steel. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic going into 2022.
Explain how crucial steel is to the build out of automotives. I mean, people might not realize, right, what steel is actually used for when it comes to the car space. What are the specific uses?
Yeah, it's amazing because whenever someone says, "What are you doing?" I say, "I'm in the steel business," and they say, "What does that mean? What does that mean?" I say, look at a car. It's the shell of the car. It's the cage of the car. It's most of the car that you're seeing, actually, but then also all of the other end markets that consume steel. So, it plays a major factor in terms of the supply chain to produce vehicles. Obviously, we've been hearing a lot about the chip shortage, and less on the steel side in the auto sector. But if you go to the construction market and other markets that consume steel, you're hearing about, the supply chain issues with steel and also the rising cost environment.
Is the semiconductor shortage impacting your business?
Indirectly. I mean, it's all one supply chain that we all share. And I think pre-COVID, no one realized how fragile a supply chain can be and how one particular part can impact the whole. And so the auto sector is a major end user for steel. And so we haven't necessarily seen the demand in the auto sector this year, but we've seen a major surge in demand in other sectors. Auto has not necessarily been there, like appliance and construction and other markets. And so if we see the auto market rebound in 2022 and we see strong demand in other sectors, how does that impact the supply chain? So, a lot of it goes back to the basic principles of economics of supply and demand.
Right.
But what will that be?
Are you experiencing delays because of a labor shortage as well?
Yeah, I mean, we've experienced delays in terms of steel from our steel producers for multitude of reasons. Labor's played a role in it. Production issues. I mean, the reality is that a steel mill can only produce so many tons in a given month, and they also need to manage the production when it comes to maintenance and outages, which is what we're experiencing right now. So all that should be resolved going into 2022. But then, what does the demand picture look like that's going to offset that? And then last, the imports, trade policy. So there's a lot of variables at stake right now.
Interesting. So last week we saw President Biden announce that the Port of Los Angeles will extend to 24/7 operations, joining the port of Long Beach. Of course, labor shortages, a question at those ports as well. But any of the congestion that we see at ports, Todd, is that impacting your business, or are you just domestically here in the United States and you don't need those particular ports, those busy, congested ones on the West Coast to do your business to the best that you can?
Yeah, no, it definitely impacts our business. We have locations all throughout the U.S. and locations that are close to port locations. And so the port congestion in terms of getting steel off the port has definitely impacted the market and lead times. It's just as challenging. So the port congestion is not only getting the ship offloaded, but also then being able to get the material into a warehouse and also get a truck to transfer the material. I mean, the supply chain starts there, it doesn't stop there, and steel is a global market. So, you know, it's definitely impacted all of our businesses within the steel sector. And I think that 2022, many more are going to be relying on imports due to the lack of domestic supply and also the price difference that can also have an impact in terms of what that means of getting material through the ports.
So, Todd, we did hear from Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg over the weekend saying that he does anticipate these supply chain issues will persist through next year, echoing many comments that we've heard from business leaders just about the current situation. My question to you is, what is your forecast? How long do you expect some of these issues that persist without the supply chain to last?
Yeah, I think it's going to be ongoing. I mean, COVID exposed it, but there was a lot of buildup to that situation. So it's not like overnight, all of a sudden, this became an issue. I think that this was an issue prior to COVID, but obviously the pandemic expedited it. And so I think we're going to see ongoing issues throughout the supply chain because of labor issues, because of transportation issues. And there's so many points in it that, you know, you hear the saying, a chain's as strong as its weakest link. So you fix one part of it, but then if there's another part of it that's disrupted, it can impact the supply chain. So, you know, I don't think this is going away. I think this is something which is why, you know, there needs to be a bigger focus on it here in America in terms of infrastructure and industrial supply chain. I think, you know, you've seen all of the money and work that's gone into the consumer supply chain, warehousing, transportation, digital, to be able to have transparency, and you can know, you know, where a package is throughout the process until it arrives at your doorstep. But when it comes to the industrial supply chain and the steel supply chain, it's lacking there. So there needs to be a major investment in that infrastructure and also the supply chain as a whole.
All right, Todd Leebow, CEO of Majestic Steel. Todd, thanks so much for joining, and we wish you the best.